What's happening, guys? Saul here. Before we get into the show, just want to tell you about a special offer. If you're a coach and you're interested in ball mastery, 1v1 and small-sided games, the staples of the best academies in the world and what we talk about a lot on this podcast, you can now get a 20% discount on the My Personal Football Coach Level 1 and Level 2 Ball Mastery and 1v1. All right, so Level 1 is like a basic introduction into this methodology, and number 2 is much more in-depth look at 1v1, ball mastery, how to structure sessions and all those soft skills as well. Just use this code, MPFC Coach, and get 20% off now. We also include that 20% off on the virtual conference as well. Just follow the link in the description. But without further ado, let's get into the show. So guys, welcome back to another Coaching Family special. Joined as usual by my good friend and colleague Glen Hicks. Glen, how you doing, mate?
I am very well, thanks, Saul.
And back again, another very special guest, Alex Nichols. Alex, if you don't know, one of the top skills coaches in the country, ex-Arsenal, many other academies. Skills specialist, runs small group sessions around the country with a lot of top players, also works a lot in America now. Alex, how you doing, mate?
Really well, thanks, mate. Good morning.
So a good topic I thought we'd go on was passing or dribbling, what's more important? So topical debate, we see a lot of stuff on socials, a lot of coaches. As always, people think to be one or the other. So let's get into it, good chat about it, and then chat about session design and always, and impact on coaches, and impact most importantly on our players and how we're coaching. So Alex, what's your thoughts on that initial, mate, that topic?
Yeah, so I think people, sometimes it's a little bit too simplistic, isn't it? I always think it's important that you kind of scale it from the top backwards. What does it look like at the top end? And I also think when people are discussing it, they don't actually take into account the level of player that they're trying to develop and actually what the actual targets are. Obviously, we've all worked in kind of high level environments at top academies. So ultimately, the goal has always been for us, Premier League and Champions League. Now, ultimately, the players that we're developing have to be able to do both. But it doesn't matter how you look at it, passing is the most dominant action or dominant technical action in the game of football. So it's not that passing isn't important, it's just about when we prioritise it, how we prioritise it, and balancing it off with dribbling. Because actually to develop passing is just as key as what it is dribbling, but dribbling takes a lot more repetition, and at the younger age groups, especially the foundation phase, entering the early youth development phase, they've got to get maximal touches, because in the modern game, players are staying on the ball for longer, regardless of position, whether that's a goalkeeper or centre-back, or someone that plays at the top of the pitch.
Interesting. Glenn?
Yeah, I agree with what was said there, but the key word that Alex used there is when, because if we're talking about youth development podcast, I think, if you're saying to me what would I prefer to do with, say, 6 to 9 year olds, kids, boys and girls that are not quite fully physically developed yet, I'd always say dribbling first. If you said to me you got 30 minutes or 30 minutes, what would you do? I'd do dribbling, because of the relationship with the ball and the feet, the comfortability that sometimes you can't claw back, and most importantly, which people forget as well, is the movement literacy and the physical literacy and the movement of the hips and the dynamism and just everything really, the gains that you get from dribbling. But that's not to say it's more important than passing, because like Alex said, passing is the conduit, isn't it? It's the connector that you've got 11 players, it's a pass that connects everyone. And like Alex said, it's the most done thing on a football pitch to pass and receive the ball. But I think hopefully we can dig into the whole ages and stages and then different types of passing and dribbling and whatever. But like Alex said, just staying on the ball as opposed to dribbling is such a key attribute. Watching an under-8 goalkeeper put his foot on the ball and pause and just stay with the ball for a while is a really important skill to encourage from a young age as well. So,
yeah, I think you both made real pivotal points there, isn't it? I mean, obviously it's about, if you look at the game at the highest level, the ball is moved around, that's how it works, but obviously it's understanding the stages of development and when and where things are most appropriate. Like you say, are you measuring it off in terms of what's more beneficial for what age group? And like you say, Glenn, you make that point, is that with the very youngest, individual possession surely has to be the priority. Supporting players to stand on the ball, but also you have ball striking within that. So you still work on ball striking techniques. You're passing different passes of your foot, you're shooting, all those different areas. But that's still individual possession. Maybe my emphasis isn't group possession, but I'm still working on but I've still got some ball striking in there, isn't it? So it's about when and where it's important. I think it's a misconception about when we're coaching young players. We're not necessarily, look, you have to dribble more, you have to pass. I think it's about young players making their own decisions. Understanding that. Look, we encourage them to stay on the ball, but they want to move the ball. I don't think there's a point you say, look, you have to dribble. I mean, the worst thing is saying you have to pass. So, if I'm doing a session, I'm doing a session at the moment with a talented group of under-9s, academy boys in London. A lot of sessions is those small-sided game situations where I'm saying, we set up a 2v2 and a 3v3, never with an overload, but set those movements up and they say, look, okay, you make your decision. If you get caught, you do that. But you just want players to be exciting, I think. You want players to be exciting. That might be a split pass forward, or that might be beating 2 or 3 players. So I think to get past that misconception where saying one's more important than the other, or saying we still definitely want more players to spend more time on the ball. But I think we want players to make their own decisions, obviously. And the danger comes, and this is reality, is that when they get into those team environments, and especially particularly in academy football, the reality is it is more about group possession, particularly even at 8, 9s and 10s, and saying you have to pass, move it quick and those sorts of things. So I think this calls for another bit of balance. And what you said there, Glenn, really interesting as well about the movement outcomes, isn't it? How do you getting that balance, that coordination, that agility, those flexibility, those hips is really key. So then, Alex, tell us a bit then, tell us about your sessions and what they look like, and how you deal with that, that balance of the individual possession or the group possession, or really let's talk about, just maybe dribbling and the ball strike. And I think that's more important, that's more reality, isn't it? I think especially us skills coaching, that's the ball strike is really important. It's just important as the dribbling, but how do we get that into your sessions?
Yeah, so I think first of all you have to recognise where your session sits within the player's week. So my sessions that I deliver, I may have a player that I see for 2 hours on a Sunday, for example, and an additional online one-to-one with them. So I'll have a maximum of 3 hours of kind of their week kind of schedule. So within that, the way I try to approach it is I try to give them what they're not going to be getting at their club, whether they're at an academy or they're at a grassroots club. So everything that we do is very heavily skewed towards individual possession, lots of unopposed, but then also building to semi-opposed and fully opposed work. And then within that, I always like to break it down into core elements of passing, receiving, aerial receiving, ball striking, and then ultimately dribbling or kind of skill combinations as such. And I think that kind of covers all the different areas of ball mastery. I think people overlook the fact that passing is an element of ball mastery. If you cannot weight a pass appropriately, if you cannot make appropriate contacts on the ball, you haven't mastered the football for the outcome that's desired. So it's not that passing is kind of ostracized. It's just that an understanding that within their academies, they're going to be doing a degree of possession or passing repetition. So my emphasis is heavily skewed at the very beginning in terms of skill combinations and actually breaking down the finer details as to how players need to move with the ball, but also their ability to stay with it and actually execute it with a level of consistency at high speed and with appropriate detail. Truth be told, I think in academy, doesn't matter how big or small, I think very few coaches up and down the country know how to break down technical execution. And because they don't understand how to break down it, it's due to a lack of education. I don't think there's enough education out there for people. And I also think people are rushing too quickly into businesses as opposed to actually learning the trade inside the system, which is where the best players are, and actually doing it for a number of years, a minimum of 5 to 10 years before they can actually kind of break out. I think that you have to then take into account linking things together. Actually, it's not just about making sure that they are doing a skill combination. It could be a skill combination to a pass. It's about embedding kind of different actions depending on the ability of your players. The higher ability players, you'd want to be linking different technical actions in a variety of environments like unopposed, semi-opposed, and fully opposed. It could be skill combinations into a ball strike. It could be ball striking into a little bit of receiving. But ultimately, the higher level players need to be able to link these actions with dynamism, consistency, and the ability to scan all the while to help them make decisions when they're in game type situations.
And tell us what, in practice, what that looks like in your session, because obviously you work with those groups, small groups and big groups. How do you talked about pass and receiving, for example. Because let's talk about that. How do you get that across without? Because obviously you're not talking about a group possession. Because people think pass and receiving, right? They'll do a rondo or they'll do like a possession practice. Tell us how you do pass and receiving within working still with that individual possession focus.
So quite simply, you can do it in a number of ways. I like to be quite rigid, so that when you have a rigid practice and a very simple practice, it allows as much focus on the technical detail for the players as possible, rather than spending 10, 15 minutes learning the practice. So it could just be moves in twos, lots of pair work where they get maximum repetition, where they're working on a specific receiving technique, whether that's stepping in with a fake to receive, whether that's receiving with disguise, and then also making sure that they're able to punch the ball with appropriate detail. I mean, I don't think people break down the value of balance when it comes to any type of ball mastery, passing included. So you're working in pairs, you maximize repetition, and then all the player's focus is kind of 5 or 6 core principles of the detail of the pass or the detail of the receiving. And then once you have a simple session, 90% of your time is spent actually refining the players with the core principles that they understand, whether that's balance, whether that's ball contact, whether that's the angle of the ankle. I just don't think that players get enough exposure to that type of detail. And so it can help them to understand what it is that they're trying to achieve. Because it could be that they get 4 things out of 5 correct, and that 5th one that they're not sure is missing, that's the role of the coach to then help them refine it and develop it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I just had this thought the other day, and I did a session with 3 players, and I was working on shooting technique, and I was really like breaking it down. Obviously, you know, the ball striking, body position, landing on the kicking foot, full momentum with the strike. And I thought, how much difficult that is to do if I had a group of 10 or 12, for example. That's a challenge, isn't it? Because for me, it's always about tempo of the session, ball to player ratios, keeping things. So the challenge can be sometimes when you're working on that is that, you know, you want to avoid queuing and things like that. How do you work on those shoots? I remember the famous old FA shooting one, which used to be, you had half the pitch, you have goals down the middle, you have one person in the middle, 2 people either side. I remember first doing that was at Tottenham, God knows how many years ago. But the challenge, obviously, getting that. So it's about obviously having the ability to structure a session and focus on those technical areas where you're still getting the contact time and those sorts of things, but hone down that technique where you're not losing or compromising, any of that time, isn't it? We don't want people standing around or people that ball rolling time. Glenn, what's your thoughts on that then? How do you do that? If you're going to do, for example, you want to work on a shooting session with a group, what does that look like to still make sure you maximising your outcomes?
Yeah, so I always try and structure my sessions. I'm big on the 4 ball responsibilities: receiving, retaining, releasing, and retrieving the ball. If we can get something in there, and I'll give you a simple game where everything comes out. So the very basic 1v1. I'm standing opposite you, Saul, and we're going to play pick and end. So I stand opposite you. We play 2 or 3 passes, but you might change that. You might say, right, it's 2 touch passes. Really wrap it into each other to test each other's first touch. But whatever, we pass the ball to each other 2 or 3 times. You've already got your basics of your first touch and your receiving in there. On the 3rd one, Saul punches it into me, and it's a test of my first touch because you're now running at me from 2 or 3 yards away, and I've got to manoeuvre my first touch. So already before we've gone into the 1v1 duel, we've got our passing in, and there's pressure on my first touch, and I've got to be smart with my first touch. I've got to take it away from the pressure. I might have to hide my intentions and reverse my touch to get away from you. Now we're racing right and left to a gate, right? So your job, Saul, now is you're retrieving. How close can you get to me? Can you get contact on me, and can you retrieve the ball, or at least stop me scoring? And if I get past the gate that I'm running to on my right, I'm about to wrap it in the goal. So now I've got my ball striking on the move. Not only have I done my twisting and turning and rocking and rolling away from you, I'm running down the line almost like I'm whipping in the cross, or I'm whipping in a shot into the bottom corner. And now your focus is, the defending side of it is, can you get your blocks in? So I think and that's a little 6-second practice. We've gone pop, pop, pop. I've burst left or right. You've chased me, and you're getting your passing and receiving techniques in there early on in it. And again, by the way, you can change that. I've been
how do you do that one? And so you've got 16 players. How does that work with how do you set that up? So you just
I think you just do a queue
rotation or
do a queue of maybe 2 to 3 players. So they've got to rest 1 in 3 or maybe 4 because it's quite high intensity. This but
I think 1 to 4 is good work to rest ratio for any
so you have 2 groups. You have 4 that side, 4 this side, and it's high intensity stuff. This you're talking about getting 5 or 6 goes in the next couple of minutes, and your legs are going to be blowing. It's going to be hot. But the intensity is one thing, but I think the intentions of the practice have to be correct. Do the players understand the intentions? Do they know they're really working on the passing, or are they just having a jolly up kicking the ball to each other? Yeah. Does the guy defending know he's got to get tight? What's your intentions? Can you get close? Can you make contact? Can you deny the space for the pass? So the intentions of the practice are most important. So I just duplicate it. So I'd go 8 there, 8 there. If it was only one coach, I'd stand in the middle and make sure I can see both. There's not too much to manage. A short goes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing as well. I talk about this a lot, and I did the session the other day for the Surrey Football Coach Association down at Fulham. Same thing as well. It's about, as a coach, having the confidence of having more than one thing going on at one time, isn't it? So how you talked about those 2s, those 3s together. You got 8 players there, 8 players there. I did a session the other night. I had 6 groups of 3. All working at once. You know what I mean? So having the quality, you're still getting the quality repetition in there. I say to lots of coaches, you don't have to see every single thing. So you can see most of it, but you'd much rather players, trial and error, have a go rather than have a queue of 8 people, queuing. One goes, have it goes, and the next one goes. Do you know what I mean? Like they're waiting for a bus, isn't it? So that's a challenge, isn't it, as well? But so you have to find that balance between, like great point there, but Krillin's about the work to rest ratios. You want to maximise it. So if it's too short, you're knackered, you're fatigued, you're not going to get any technical outcomes anyway. It's going to drop. But you want, I think, if I'm doing like a 1v1 practice, 1 to 4 is a pretty good guide. And then obviously like with the ball striking, can you do it in 2s or 3s or 4s? So you get as many contact times as possible. Alex, what's your thoughts, mate, in terms of that?
I think that comes before any technical detail as a coach. I think that comes in part of setting the environment, which I think you could be a poor or a coach in their early years, like learning how to develop players at a high level. But if you set your environment right, you'll get positive outcomes, even if your technical detail and your ability to help in a concise way is pretty poor. If you set an environment right with those kind of principles, like number 1, safety, number 2, intensity, number 3, correct ratios, where players are getting more goes, you actually provide a springboard for the players to excel, regardless of where they're at within their own technical journey. I see so many people get that part wrong, where you've got 10 players watching 2 players work, and ultimately repetition is the mother of kind of development as such. And so ultimately, if you're lacking reps, then you will not get your outcomes short or long term. And my time at Brentford, we were masters of that, and I didn't really appreciate it exactly how good we were at doing it at Brentford, because every age group from 7s and 8s all the way up to 15s and 16s and beyond. And actually, when you actually broke down from session to session, week to week, the additional touches that players were having because of the session design, sometimes you were thousands of touches ahead of other players in other clubs within a month, let alone across the course of a year and let alone across the course of a phase. And
test about how, like, for example, you're doing this. You coach all age groups now. You do a lot of younger players now in the sessions, like your 8s and 9s. Tell us the difference between what's an 8 and 9 session would look like to compare like a 15s or 16 sessions like you're doing at Arsenal. Yeah. Talk about that, and have that same question in mind about the individual possession, the group possession, or the ball strike and the dribbling. What are the differences? What are the similarities?
Yeah, so the similarities is that there was still a place for unopposed, semi-opposed and fully opposed at both under 8, or when I did the 8s at Arsenal, I was the head coach for the 9s, compared to when I was doing the 14s, 15s and 16s as a technical specialist at Arsenal. There's still a place for players linking together complex combinations, because you're still working with high-level players at 8s and 9s. Difference is there's probably a wider variety of technical actions where you may actually try to build in, like I say, passing, receiving, and still combinations within the same action. Intensity would be just as high, but then also you're looking at, within the same practice, can you then drip feed in an element of opposed, semi-opposed, and unopposed practice within that 15-minute spell? Now, obviously, when I was doing it with the older players at Arsenal at 15s and 16s, that was my kind of remit, that was my specialism. And we'd maximise the time by basically having players come out early, first 10 minutes before the season session even started as a rival activity. It may be some informal 2v2s, kick-up variation, just getting the players touches. There's no jogging around the pitch, there's nothing like that. You get 20 minutes in there, so then you squeeze an extra 20 minutes on top before the actual ball mastery starts. And then when you get into the ball mastery element, that's when you start to get into your nuts and bolts and really kind of ramp up the intensity and the level of challenge. And like I say, it's ultimately about linking actions in a variety of environments, unopposed, semi-opposed and fully opposed.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think to like my sessions, like the individual sessions I do, like, I'll do like a bit of a ball mastery warm up, do some dynamic stretches, and there's always some ball striking in that, so if it's in a pitch, with the wall, it'd be like some inside foot passes, talking about 50 to 100 inside foot passes, just part of the extended warm up. Then some further back, some laces, driven passes, and different sort of type driven passes. If I'm working on a 11 side with a pro, with Nonny, one of those guys there, just be some simple one-touch stuff, some returning to receive, punch it back as part of the warm-up. So the ball striking is always a pivotal role. And I think a lot of my stuff now, like I say to all players, all coaches, that even I'm doing my sessions, I'm doing receiving, I'm doing turning, all around 1v1, any 1v1 work, there's always some sort of end product, and that's some sort of ball strike. More than often than it's not, it's a shot. If I've got a goal there, I'm going to utilise the goal. Maybe it's a forward pass, or maybe it's a cross, isn't it? I think that's really important. And another one of the things I say to young coaches, when you're doing that ball master, you have it, you turn. Even if I'm working with a beginner, I don't do that as much these days as I used to, but it'd be a turn to pass or a turn to 1-2 to then play forward, isn't it? So such an important part. players at every age group. I thought this the other day with Nonny is like sometimes when I'm setting him to do a little set, he likes to do a couple more little 1-2s, bang bang bang, just to rhythm it and be on the move and get that little bit more of a feel and game flavour. Glenn, what's your thoughts about that then, mate? We're talking about that ball striking, the individual progression. Of course, it's a bit different for you, Glenn, isn't it? Because you work more in that team environment now, obviously with the academy and with the college program.
Yeah.
How do you balance that in terms of?
Yeah, we do. So, but I really structure it. I always bring it back to the individual, mate. Like the small group stuff, build the technical base, loads of 1v1, 2v1. So, for example, a lot of the stuff you're talking about there, there's I call it a multifunctional practice where you design it to get everything in. Make sure you're getting your passing and receiving. Make sure you're getting dribbling. So, for example, again, I'm trying to say it so the listeners can see it without a picture, right? Just say 2v2 at each goal, right? The goals are about 25 yards apart or whatever, age appropriate, could be 15 yards apart. It's just 2v2. Me and my mate are at this end, and I've got a big thing about passing on the move as well, so there's a hell of a lot of static passing, and it's good. But 90% of passes are when you're moving. Whether you're just walking to receive it, like I'm just trotting out from centre back and my mate rolls it in front of me feet. Or if I'm Kyle Walker on the run, I'm running 50%, I'm still running quite quick. Can you put it into my space rather than my feet? So a good one for that, for example, is I'm with a mate beside my goal and there's another pair the other side. It's a race, first of all, so you put a bit of a competition element in. And I say, go. Right, you've got to do one touch passing to get to the other team's goal. You just got to run and pass it on the flow in a straight line to start with. So it's just a race. So now all of a sudden I'm running and I'm getting a little front foot pop off the outside, or I play off my second foot on the inside, but we're passing on the move. And at the end of it, you get your ball striking. So I've played my final pass for Saul, which actually the detail, it's really allowed him to either step on and whip it on the inside. But we've got passing on the move and we've got a ball striking. It's probably taken 5 seconds. Then you chuck a third ball in and say, right, now it's a 2v2. You two oranges play against the two blues. Wrap the ball in, and now you've got a 2v2 little combat zone game. You're going to have all your decision making. Does the one defender jump, so I'll pass it in behind, and then again you've got to receive it on the move. So just something as simple as that, and then you can progress that by saying, right, now guys, you're allowed to dribble, right? Go to the goal as quick as you can, but you must combine, get the ball once or twice each. So you've got to at least connect once. So now I might play across to Saul. Saul decides to drive across the middle of the pitch like a crossover. I've now got to work on my overlap, and Saul plays his little reverse pass. Same practice, unopposed, going to the goal. As Saul reverses the pass, I smash it in on the move. But with a simple, really simple practice like Alex said, because I'm big on simple practices. That's a very simple practice to understand, guys. It's 2v2, race to the goal and score. But you've got to be passing the ball on the move. And just by refining it, saying, okay, I want to see a bit more dribbling now, or staying on the ball. So say, right, okay, one of you's be the dribbler. Saul, you've got to dribble the whole time because, really got to work on that stuff. And I just move off of Saul. If he goes right, I go left. When he plays it to me, I'm going to pop it straight back to him. And again, whatever constraints you put on that is based on what you're trying to get out. Have you got a player in your group that needs to work on his little final pass, a little number 10 that wants to prod that little David Silva pass? Have you got a player that is a brilliant dribbler in terms of skill and getting past players, but he don't see the final pass? Can you get him practicing that final pass for his mate making a run? Do you know what I mean, Saul? So it's a very basic practice, and I'm with Alex on that as well. I like to keep the practice as simple as possible in terms of understanding, but then crank up the technical and decision-making difficulty, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's think about, if I'm talk about grassroots coaches or even academy coaches, right? So I've got team coach. You talked about a bit about there, Glenn, but let's focus a bit more into it. I always go back to my time at Tottenham, that under-9s year under Chris Ramsey. We didn't work on group possession once in the whole year in terms of a formal possession practice. But, so it's much more everything based on 1v1, 2v2, 3v3s. We still, every single session had ball striking elements into it. Passing might be, 75s, as we call it, or short, long. So because ball striking is still key, but we didn't necessarily. We try to make it more of like a spontaneous playground environment. So we played those small 66 games. We did really well. An 8v8 game, we'd get absolutely horrendously hammered because we just didn't. We'd get passed off the pitch. But we didn't mind actually had the bigger picture. And then obviously when we went to 11s. Then there's much more group possession as well. So obviously we still did the same thing, 1v1s, ball strike, but then more, because the pitch opens up all the time, then you've got to help the players, haven't you? You need to have some of that guidance. So my question is, that's where I'm coming to now, rather a long way around, is that, so those young, let's talk about age appropriate stuff, those grassroots coaches, they're in that Sunday league or the Saturday league, how can they help players? So they need to basically tick all those boxes, get your individual possession, obviously that's key, but then obviously you need that group possession element also, and in terms of that, 7v7, or particularly when it goes to 9v9, how do we strike that balance, as coaches, in terms of supporting the players when they need it, particularly when the pitch opens up, So you have that group possession, but we still have that focus on individual development. And we're not just saying just dribbling, we're saying just staying on the ball, or ball striking, or being able to receive the ball under pressure. Alex, what's your thoughts on that?
What's happening, guys? Saul here. Just a quick note to say we've got a 20% off discount now on the coaching courses on mypersonalfootballcoach.com on the level 1 and level 2 ball mastery 1v1 and small-sided games. So if you want to learn more about ball mastery, 1v1 and small-sided games, some of the staples of the best academies in the world, and a lot we talk about here, just follow the link in the bio and use this code MPFCCoach and get 20% off. This discount is also valid on the virtual conference as well. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to these type of situations, and I think it happens in academy football too, it depends how big your desire is for the W at under 9 and under 10. Now, we're all in agreement that the win is neither here nor there when it comes to actually developing players at any kind of level. The problem is that that's not always seen in the environments that you set. So I think setting the environment as a coach in terms of the expectations, not just for the players, but for the parents, so everyone's aligned as to what you're looking for, that's the starting point. And then everything that you do then feeds off of that. So if you're talking about doing 3v3s in your possession when you was at Spurs and doing the 9 season, the reality is, in that 3v3, you have all the principles of a 11v11 possession. You still have players on the ball, you still have players around the ball, and you still have a player that's away from the ball. However, they just get far more repetitions of being either on, around, or away, plus they get more touches in. But the thing is, obviously, like you said, when you played 8v8, you got less success. Of course you would, when you're playing against teams that can pass it. But what it does, it gives a short-term win when you're taking that approach to 8v8, whereas what you're trying to do is kind of develop the long-term. Now, I think we try to rush players through, and obviously many adults, and I've seen this happen so many times in my career, where adults as coaches try to put their own adult approach, and they want to see almost adult football played by 8 and 9-year-olds, without an understanding that they are playing development football as opposed to outcome football. And once you begin to separate those two aspects of development football being from under 6, by the time a player can stand up and kick it, all the way up to under 23s or under 21s football, that is a development learning phase where actually there should be more risk. Now, how much risk varies depending on the age group of the player and the ability of the player, but there should be much more of that happening, and we've got to be prepared, and you've got to set an unconditional environment whereby if you have them once a week as a grassroots coach, twice a week for 2 hours, prioritize your touches, because the players will develop far more long-term and even medium-term rather than getting a W on the weekend.
Glenn, what's your thoughts on that?
I think courage comes into it in a big part, and obviously understanding and knowledge. So, and I really believe, I don't want to bash coaches and parents and stuff, but a lot of it comes down to education, and I think that's where academies have got a lot better in terms of we have a lot of parent meetings, and like, this is what we're doing, this is why we're trying to do it, this is how we're going to do it. Guys, this is what it's going to look like sometimes. Your son's going to struggle, your daughter's going to struggle. It's going to look messy, it's going to look chaotic. But believe me, working through the chaos, there's coming creativity. There's unbelievable problem solving. There's little challenges that little Joey and Johnny and Jessica or whatever are working through. So I think understanding is a big thing. But I think the courage, Saul, is the courage of the coach to say, and the player. So we've got to remember at a young age when we're asking the kids to stay on the ball. So we was developing courage. And I know I sound repetitive, I've said this loads of times, but you're developing the player's ability to trust themselves. Do I back myself? Because there's nothing more frustrating when I go and watch a game. If I'm just passing a game, Saul, and it doesn't matter whether it's academy football, grassroots, just a game of football with young kids, let's say 9 and below or 11 and below, primary school age. There's nothing worse than seeing kids rush into passes and just keep passing the ball early. So they're not passing the ball. I say it all the time, they're passing the buck. They just pass. I'm thinking, hang on, you've got 15 yards of space. When I watch Mickey van der Ven play football, Saul, and I know we've done a thing on him recently in the My Personal Football Coach Virtual Academy, right? Every single first touch is forward. The intentions is to go forward. And it's phenomenal to watch. I'm taking the ball forward. I'm going forward and taking the game. And I'm going for you. And I think that in itself is an attitude. That's a statement. That's courage in a player. And I think if you look at Ange Postecoglou, for example, I think he's trying to build them players into his team. First foot forward. We grew up on it, didn't we, Saul? First foot forward. Doesn't mean you've got to go forward. First foot forward, can your intentions be? So, and if I'm just going to pass it sideways or just pass it quick, the kid's not going to develop that courage. And I think whether you're a back half player or a top end player, a Mickey van der Ven or a Harry Kane or whatever, it's that mindset. I think the best players, the very best in the world, including the Rio Ferdinands as well from years ago, are attack-minded players. And I think we've got to, when they make mistakes and fall flat on their face, whether it's with a forward pass that gets cut out and the other team score, or he's trying to go by the man because he didn't have a pass, I think we've got to have the understanding to let them foul And we've got to keep encouraging the intent and the courage on the ball. I think it's one of the biggest things. And I think it gets bashed out of kids, especially on a grassroots pitch. They get screamed and shouted at, unfortunately, far too often.
Absolutely. Let's move on then to think about the older boys, or girls, 15, 16, PDP, go to pro. I mean, then again, what's more important, dribbling and passing? And I think you look at it different, don't you? And you talk about what players get in those formal environments, whether it's the highest level or below. It is group possession centric, no matter what you look. And I think you look in most of those environments around those places. So sometimes they're dribbling, or in terms of or even just staying on the ball a little longer is more important, because the players just don't have that ability, or they don't get the chance to do that often. And so many people say it now, those players high level, though, everyone just plays the ball square. I've just played the same story. You was working with a Cat 1, 6 or 4, we used to call it a 6 now, wants to play forward, and I said, why don't you drive forward with the ball? He goes, well, my targets aren't that. It's, can I try and play? I was like, well, why wouldn't you try and develop that, being able to drive and tap those spaces? These are talking about top level players in that position. So I think actually sometimes then you do that, and I think that's when you have to sometimes force players to spend time on the ball, and say, right, you're going to add that to your game, because as we talked about it here on the show before, is that there's so many overloaded practices. Players are always looking for that pass. They've always got their spare pass. But if you look at players at the highest level, they used to play an underloaded. They can spend time on the ball. They can break lines with the ball. So you've got to say to players sometimes, no, there's no pass here. You've got to make the decision yourself. Like you say, you've got to take the risk. You've got to take ownership. And that's where maybe sometimes, it is more important this time for you to spend time on the ball, not necessarily dribble, but to be able to, take another second, turn, break pressure, and play forward. And then you've got to try and challenge players to do that. Alex, what's your thoughts on that?
I just don't think people are aware that when you watch kind of top level football, Premier League football, Champions League football, how many goals are scored by top attackers in underloaded situations. And I think, and it goes back to what I said earlier about kind of looking at the top level and kind of scaling it back. I don't think attacking practices are done 1v2 very often. I don't think kind of small-sided 3 versus 4, 3 versus 5 kind of practice happen often enough. Because ultimately, when you're looking and you're trying to develop those top technicians to play at the highest level, that's ultimately what they're capable of doing. That's what makes them special. Going back to what you said, I think one of the biggest issues in the late youth development phase going to the PDP is that at 15, 16, a lot of coaches, and we know this at Cat 1 and Cat 2 because we've been in the system for so long, they're under pressure to win. They are under pressure to get wins. And now it's not just about winning tournaments like the Premier League Cups and those type of tournaments and the Floodlit Cup. They're under pressure to win game after game after game, especially against local rivals, whether that's London-based or in the Northwest or wherever it may be. So with that in mind, you're talking about your number 6 that you were talking about there. He will be encouraged to retain the ball because ultimately it's about being safe, not about developing towards the first team. And I think a lot of academies have got to do a better job in the late youth development phase and the professional development phase. And number 1, making players excellent at their specific position, whether that means them staying on the ball, at least being able to progress it. And we just spoke about kind of the various positions that happens in. But then also ensuring that actually your target is to develop players for the first team, as opposed to kind of winning X tournament or another tournament that may come along, or just winning in general. Now, winning is a great habit to have, but ultimately, even at 16, you're still trying to develop players to play in your first team, and that ultimately has to be the remit.
I think also this made that point now is that at that level is like how they have to be courageous. Say we want players to take risk, and they've got to understand that still 17, 18, 19, 20 players aren't the finished article yet, are they? And if you keep saying right, okay, like say play percentages, and a lot of it's driven towards data now, isn't it? Oh, I need to have X amount of passes in one game, pass completions in one game. But if it's like a 5-yard, everyone says this, 5-10 yard pass square. What's the real benefit? How's that going to stand out? So again, isn't it? It's about understanding it's still the development phase of a player's career, and even though like that it becomes more under the microscope as it gets to that stage, players still got to be able to try and be brave and make mistakes there. Glenn, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that whole, so you said about X passes, XG drives me bonkers as well, Saul, to be honest. It's a bit of a myth to me, to be honest. But anyway, the development phase for me, I'm going to think of someone in a long career like a Ryan Giggs, for example, and we have to consider, I think players are always in a development phase, always, till the day they retire. Every player's in a development phase. I watched Lionel Messi the other night, Saul, with a gleeful smile on my face, like I know everybody else did, at 37 years old. Absolutely, single-handedly take Bolivia apart with a hat-trick and 2 assists. And I'm thinking, it's true what everyone's been saying. This guy's not human, but I believe he's in a development phase. He's in a different phase of his career. He's not as, he's still incredibly explosive compared to the normal footballer. But I think everyone's always in a development phase, and it's our skill to work out where are they. Our job as a coach is ultimately, who's the player? Okay, it's Saul. What is he? How tall is he? How fast is he? Where is he? 12 to 16. Oh, do we understand that they're going through a chaotic growth? So that's the reason he can't get from box to box. He's all gangly like a giraffe. Or I think it's our job to meet the players where they are, which is really, really important. So in terms of what we then give them for their diet, because if they are going through growth, well, don't do as many of them 1v1 pick and then twisty turny dynamic games, or don't put the load-ins as much on their joints. Maybe if we're really considering where they are, but I would say as they get older, Saul, like Alex said, towards the PDP, one thing we have to consider is individual profile and personalities and nature. We have to. So this whole nature-nurture thing, I know we're crossing over subjects here, but for me, you have to combine the two, because if you look at a number 6 we were speaking about, Saul, for me, I've seen lots and lots of different types of number 6, from 6'4", incredible range of reaching and intercepting, and quite slow gears. He's probably got a third gear in Busquets, to N'Golo Kante that is as quick and as dynamic as anybody, right? So you look at the polar opposites. You've got a player there in Busquets that will wriggle out of trouble using wonderful ball manipulation, but still take 2 or 3 people out of the game. Whereas Kante will see a pocket of space between you and Alex, and he'll just burst through it, like you said, and he'll break lines that way. So are they both still doing a good job at number 6 for their teams? Yes. But are they doing it slightly differently? Yes. And I think that's what we also, the nearer they get to full growth, or like adulthood, should we say, in terms of like what size and height and what their specialism is going to be, I think we need to adjust to that as well, Saul. Do you know what I mean? We have to push them towards their super strengths as well. So I think it's, a couple of key points in there, I think.
Yeah. So. Very interesting.
So just on the back of that, Saul, I just think when you get to late youth development phase, 15, 16 and beyond, I really think that it gets neglected. I think coaches aren't interested in it. I think, and when I say coaches, I'm talking about coaches very often in the system. They want to get into dig into the tactics and so on and so forth. And so we went for a period about between 5 and 10 years ago where everybody made a push towards ball mastery at the younger age groups, and rightly so. I think everybody's aware of that on both sides of the Atlantic, especially with my experience in the US and here. I think the new issue that you have is the late youth development phase going into the professional development phase, where players are not being given enough focus on unopposed, semi-opposed, fully opposed kind of repetition of technical actions. But then they'll happily sit down, turn on the Champions League and watch a Vinicius Junior or whatever player you care to name and be like, goodness me, they're technically phenomenal. But they stop doing that work at 15 and 16 and they stop getting the reps in. And obviously I'm generalising, but I don't think it's pushed enough from the clubs that they're at and the academies in terms of taking charge of it.
Interesting. And any takeaways then? It's the last one for coaches, particularly in terms of this, dribbling or passing. Something to say, for those those coaches, young or old, who are going to put sessions on. Alex, you first, mate.
Put the player first. Ensure that the individual is kind of their needs are met. Especially if you're working with the younger players, their will and want. Even the older players, they want to touch the ball straight away. Give them a method. Find a methodology of them getting meaningful touches on the ball from the moment they step on the pitch. It will add to engagement, and it will ultimately develop them technically. If you can sprinkle some detail on that with high repetition, then you're on to a winner.
Hixie?
Meet the players where they're at. Who are they? What do they need? How can you help them? Would be my really simple. I know that's a bit of a John Allpress line for anyone that knows John Allpress, who's a fantastic player developer, but for me it works. And also, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but ask your players. And like what Alex said there, the number one thing you get from giving a kid a ball each and spending lots and lots of time is it's enjoyable. We all want to do it. Kids are quite egocentric. So yeah, give them the ball. Lean towards that first and foremost at a young age. And then as the older they get, start to refine it and meet their growing needs and developing needs as well.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I'd add that understand the difference between individual possession and group possession, and understanding, individual possession still means lots of ball striking, lots of passing, shooting, receiving, but not necessarily with the focus on the group, but just on the individual. Listen, guys, thanks very much. It's been top. Alex, I know you're heading out to America at Christmas, do some more camps out there so people can find you. Just send your social pages so people can find you, get information on that, mate.
Yeah, it's on Instagram. It's coach_Alex N. Same for Facebook. And email is alex@coachalexn.co.uk.
Top draw, guys. Much appreciated. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Thanks, mate.